Happy Halloween! Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jay, and guys, today I have a very special video for you. Today guys, we are going to talk about female-centered horror movies. Now that can entail whether they are feminist in theme or they just are, their main characters are female, or they're female forward and feminist friendly, I guess. So I wanted to make this list for a couple reasons. I've been wanting to make this list for a while, and I put it off because I have a hard time narrowing down what sort of movies I should include without creating this enormous list. And I have just given up the fact that I will never have all the movies on here that I want, but I pared it down to, I believe, I pared it down to 8 movies that are recent, that I really love, and just because they're female forward or feminist friendly doesn't mean that they aren't, you know, friendly to the male viewership. They are classic, grade A, amazing horror movies that I think anyone would enjoy, but just celebrate the power of femininity just that little bit extra for your Halloween viewing. And guys, I have to address the fact that, you know, I have been a little quiet on my channel lately, even my Instagram, just because Halloween is so special to me in a lot of different ways, and we'll get into the movie soon, I promise. But I just want to say that, like, I spend all year long looking forward to this time of year, and then I sort of inadvertently burn myself out in anticipation. I watch horror movies and read horror books all year long, and then Halloween gets here and I'm like, I've already done all this. But I wanted to make this video as a celebration of all things spooky, all things female, all things awesome. So let's get into the movie list. So the first movie that I want to talk about is Jennifer's Body, and this came out in 2008. Now, you guys, I know that probably a lot of you are familiar with this movie, but when I was like thinking about adding this to my list, I had asked a couple friends about this movie, and a surprising amount of people have not seen this movie for one reason or another. Part of me thinks that people discount it because the main character is played by Megan Fox, and Megan Fox has sort of garnered this like stupid hot girl type of persona in the wider media, which is just not true. Homegirl's actually really smart and self-aware, but anyway, we're gonna get past Megan Fox because the genius of this movie is not necessarily subtle, but it's not something that is apparent if you just go by the trailers of this movie. And when you watch the trailer, you'll notice that like their big like claim to fame is like a girl on girl makeout scene. So at first glance, it really does feel like a gratuitous, you know, just another teen horror movie that glorifies sex, especially girl on girl action, for the sake of male viewership. But this is just not the case. When I finally took the chance to watch this movie, I realized how freaking wrong I was, and I should never judge things just by a trailer. Like, we all know this now. Do not judge things by a trailer. So what this movie is about, if you're not familiar, is about the main girl is played by Megan Fox, and she is basically a teenage girl demon who eats boys. And she doesn't start out that way in the movie, and she has a best friend played by Amanda Seyfried, and this movie is just excellent. It starts out as, you know, just a teeny bopper kind of movie, and then it evolves into sort of a revenge sort of thriller. There is just a trigger warning, an element of sexual assault, but it isn't too overt. It isn't gratuitous, I would say. They don't focus in on it heavily. And here's the thing that is absolutely freaking genius about this movie, is that it takes that typical horror movie trope of if you have sex, you will die, and it turns it on its head and actually uses a girl's promiscuity and sexuality to her advantage. It's actually something that saves and empowers her, and it is just so excellent. It's also a story about the underdog friend who sort of does what she needs to do to get shit done in this movie. Let me tell you, the two main girls of this movie are kick-ass for different reasons because of their characters, and just together they're just like an on-screen combination of perfection. Because guys, no one was ready for this hot teenage girl bisexual who ate boys. Like, let's be real. This movie is fantastic, and it is not only fantastic for female viewership, guys, you need to watch it. That's all. Okay, moving on. The next movie that I want to talk about is 2018's What Keeps You Alive. Guys, this is another movie that doesn't get the attention it deserves, at least in my opinion. When I finally watched it recently, probably just a couple weeks ago, none of my friends had seen this movie. And then when I finally convinced people to watch this movie, the reception was sort of lukewarm. And you know, I understand that not everyone's gonna have my taste, but I personally think that this is one of the best movies I've seen in a long while for a couple of reasons. But let's get into what this is about. So this movie, What Keeps You Alive, centers on a lesbian married couple who are celebrating their first year anniversary. So their names are Jules and Jackie. Yes, sorry, I couldn't figure out if it was Julie or Jackie, but it's Jules and Jackie, and they go to Jackie's family cabin by the lake, and things sort of unravel from there. Guys, this is a survival horror movie at its finest, in my opinion, because everything that happens in this movie, it's to the advantage of the villain in this movie. And what this movie sort of centers on is the idea that you never really know who you're in a relationship with, who you married, what was their past really. They only told you the highlights of their life, really, let's be honest. This movie was exhilarating to watch, honestly. It kept me at the edge of my seat. I was just constantly freaking out about what was going to happen next, and it was pretty violent. I think there were definitely moments where I was like, hey, and you know what? It was also visually stunning. I thought the shots in the movie were so beautifully done, all the colors, the music, and honestly, the main villain, the way she is, her motives and the way she is portrayed in the movie is just fantastic to me. I just really enjoyed her so much. I will say there is a hitch at the ending that I thought they could have cut it a little early, but I won't give that away. I hope you watch it so you can come back and talk to me and tell me what you think. The only complaint I have is that it could have ended at one point and they sort of pushed it a little further, which is fine. It's fine. There's something about horror movies that, like, they don't always end well, and if you find a horror movie that ends well, it's pretty much sort of a gem, because it's hard. I feel like it's hard to wrap up super scary things. It's either they end badly or they end in like a fairy tale, everyone lives happily ever after, and that's just not, I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting off track. This movie is beautiful and terrifying and exhilarating, and it's a lesbian couple at the forefront. I mean, what else could you ask for? And I really think they do well in terms of the pacing, because in the beginning they lull you into a false sense of security, and you just are so excited to be with this couple. They're obviously loving and wonderful, and then things get wild. The next movie that I want to recommend to you is As Above, So Below, and this came out in 2014. So the interesting thing about this movie, before I get into what exactly it's about, is that while I was preparing to talk about this, looking at other reviews, just like trying to formulate my thoughts around it, because I have a fully formed opinion of this movie, but I understand that it's just singularly my opinion and there are many opinions out there, I saw that there was just a strange amount of hate for this movie. People felt like it fell short and they didn't understand what was happening, and I respect that, but I just think they're wrong. And I say that in all lightheartedness. You're welcome to your opinion, but I love this movie. I love this movie so much. So we follow our main protagonist, Scarlett Marlowe, and she is a force to be reckoned with. Smart and action oriented and just motivated towards her goal. She is someone who has multiple PhDs, and she has devoted her life to finding Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone. Yes, you have heard that before because you read those Harry Potter books about the Sorcerer's Stone. And guys, this takes that sort of innocuous, like, the tale of alchemy and really gives it a horror edge. And her quest for the Philosopher's Stone leads her to the catacombs of Paris, where she and a small team descend into the catacombs, into a collective and personal hell. So this movie is perfect for me for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's set in found footage style, which I love. And it's strange because I have terrible motion sickness. Like, I can't even play video games without feeling like I'm going to die. But for some reason, most found footage movies, I think I've trained my body into I've forced my body into loving them. And I just adore found footage movie. It just has that like extra element of dread. Anyway, so it's a found footage style film. And then it also has a female main character who is sort of Tomb Raider, Lara Croft style, and also like Evie from The Mummy style, where she's smart, she can take the punches, deliver some punches, and she is a ruthless. Scarlett Marlowe is a ruthless, fearless woman who has a goal. She wants to find that Philosopher's Stone, and you best get out of her way if you're not on that same path with her. Another thing too about this movie that I really like is that it has a lot of academic and classical sort of themes. Because she is someone who is has multiple PhDs and is driven by this sort of like amazing tale of Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone. There's a lot of like Latin in the movie, and there's a lot of references to Dante's Inferno and his descent to hell. And as someone who has studied Latin and classical Greek for quite a while, my little nerdy self just absolutely loved every minute of this movie. And I do think that this movie is genuinely scary. It's atmospheric and it's claustrophobic. So if everyone has seen The Descent, it sort of takes that notion of being in small, tight spaces and puts it into this really intense Tomb Raider type of movie. I really, really love this movie, and I don't feel like it doesn't get the light of day that it deserves. So this is definitely one you'll want to check out. The next movie that I want to tell you about is The Invisible Man, that came out in 2019. And guys, this movie, directed by Leigh Whannell, one of my favorites, is just phenomenal. I actually rewatched it recently. I watched it when it first came out, and then I rewatched it recently in preparation for this video. And it is excellent, even in the second time around. Elizabeth Moss, who plays the main character Cecilia, phenomenal. Phenomenal. Homegirl knows how to play some distraught ass characters, from Handmaid's Tale to The Invisible Man. She knows how to take some punches, just saying. So if you're not familiar with the story of The Invisible Man, in this movie at least, it is about Cecilia, and she escapes her abusive, wealthy boyfriend. And soon after she escapes, after she thinks she is safe, she finds herself being stalked and gaslit by what she believes is him. But she has a hard time convincing anyone else in her life that this is a reality she is experiencing. This movie is pretty powerful in a couple of ways. As someone who has been through narcissistic, manipulative sort of relationships, and most people I think have, I think that there is a certain amount of sympathy you can garner for Cecilia. In the movie, it sort of details, aside from like the, you know, science fiction horror aspect of someone being in an invisible suit and, you know, pursuing you, there are very real moments where it's obvious that Cecilia has been isolated from her friends, and her word is no longer something that is trustworthy to her friends and family, and she has a really hard time gathering the support because she's sort of burnt out those relationships while she was with this abusive boyfriend of hers. And it really got me ruminating after the movie just how real that is. If anyone has ever been through abusive moments like that, emotionally, physically, that sort of thing. It's just almost too real in the movies. And I think that's why this movie, The Invisible Man, is particularly powerful. It is very well done. It is a very good movie, but those moments are really interesting. Honestly, if you haven't watched The Invisible Man yet, directed by Leigh Whannell, it's gotta be at the top of your list. It is so good. And if you're not super into the intense horror, this is a good place to start because it sort of bridges on sci-fi thriller almost, because I mean, it's an invisible man suit, you know. So if you're sort of like not super into the intense and gory spooks, this is a good place to be for Halloween. So the next movie that I want to talk about is very near and dear to my heart, and it is a remake, which is interesting because remakes, reboots, etc., they sort of they get a bad rap, I feel like. I feel like people write them off pretty quickly, but this one is excellent. This is the Evil Dead reboot of 2013. Now, if you have not seen it and you're familiar with the Bruce Campbell original Evil Dead, then you're probably just checking out right now. You're like, no, I don't even want to hear it. I want to hear about no Evil Dead remake. Evil Dead with Bruce Campbell is a classic. No one wants a remake. And you're right. But this reboot, I would say, is an entirely different entity that is worth your time. Like, I'm really upset that I don't own this movie because I would watch it over and over again. Well, maybe. It's really intense, guys, I'm not gonna lie. So this movie has basically the same premise with a couple of different changes. So the main character's name is Mia. Now, Mia is taken to the woods by her brother and his friends in an attempt to have sort of a secluded weekend so she can get past her drug addiction and withdrawal symptoms. Now, of course, that quickly goes awry when one of the friends finds the Book of the Dead in the basement of the cabin, and he unwittingly unleashes an evil entity that possesses Mia. Guys, I know, you're still like, Bruce Campbell though, Bruce Campbell. And I get it. I love Bruce Campbell. I love the original Evil Dead movies. This is just a whole other thing. Just treat it as a whole different movie because you're not even gonna think about Bruce Campbell in this movie. This is so good. It is gory, it is bloody, it is terrifying, it is gut-wrenchingly violent, like really shockingly violent. I rewatched it in preparation for this video, and I had seen it years ago, like probably when it first came out, and I was impressed with it then, and I am even more impressed with it now. It really holds up. It really makes my stomach turn over at some points. God, it's good. I could write a whole love letter to this movie because it's so good. And so the thing about this movie is that while it does have a lot of gore and scares and really intense moments, it also is an actual allegory to the battle of drug addiction that Mia faces throughout this movie. So Mia starts out as sort of this like doe-eyed victim of circumstance and bad choices and bad life moments, and she is really trying to make a change, and that just doesn't go well because she becomes possessed by a demon and everyone around her gets hurt or dies, basically. Now, if you pair that story to its bare bones, it's an allegory to addiction, like I said, and how it basically takes over you, possesses you, if you will, and it isolates you, it puts you in harm's way, and it harms also your friends and family that are near you. And getting over an addiction is like cutting a limb off, and you know that happens figuratively and literally in the movie, and it's just so good. Like, don't get me wrong, the story is fantastic, the allegories to addiction are amazing, and the movie is brutal and badass, and the ending is just so good. If you haven't seen this remake, you need to. If you are like a seasoned horror movie lover, you like gore, you like the scares, this is perfect for Halloween night. I'm just saying, it's the whole package. And we got a really badass female main character who overcomes a lot of things in this movie. Man! The next movie that I want to talk about is It Follows, that came out in 2014. Guys, I think a lot of people have seen this movie, but I feel like it's not being talked about. So I don't know, I have this thing that like if a horror movie is good, it should be continuously talked about. Because while horror movies are constantly being produced, that doesn't mean there are horror movies that are constantly being produced of quality. And I am a horror fan that is not picky. I will literally watch anything just to see if it's good. And if it's bad, I don't really consider my time wasted. I mean, I found out whether I like that movie or not. And It Follows is just one of those movies that every time I watch it, I am constantly amazed at the quality of this movie and the intricacy of this story. And I say that because the story just hits on so many different levels of your psyche, I feel like, especially as a female. If you watch it, you have to let me know. But basically, what this movie is about, we follow the main protagonist, and her name is Jay. And Jay decides that she's going to sleep with her new boyfriend. She goes out on a date, they do the deed, and then he informs her that he basically passed on a curse to her, that an entity will now pursue her until it kills her, and it can appear as any person, and she's the only one who can see this entity. And like I said, it will pursue her until it kills her. So that's very alarming. You sleep with your boyfriend and he's like, well, now you got a thing. You got a thing and it's gonna kill you. Sounds like STDs, right? Right. That is what this movie is about. It basically takes the classic horror trope of sex will kill you if you engage in it, and takes it up 10 notches. Guys, this entity, STD, ghost thingy-mabobber in this movie is truly terrifying. This movie is brilliantly paced. There are lots of like quiet moments of dread where you just feel like things are happening in the background, but you just don't know what. And then the scenes with this like STD entity, it just like, it comes up exponentially. It's just blaring in your face and you're just rocketed out of your seat in terror. Like, that's just how the pacing is in that movie, if that makes any sort of sense. I really love this movie, and I don't think it gets the attention that it needs. I'm gonna say that over and over again on this list because I think it's true. I think that when we visit, especially movies with a final girl like this, I think that the final girl is acted so brilliantly by this actress who plays Jay. She has a very like soft, subtle beauty that just seems very like innocent at first, and by the end of this movie, that innocence is utterly destroyed, hacked to pieces, because this STD entity has pursued her through the whole movie, and she is just done at the end of the movie. I really love this one, and if you've seen it, let me know down below if you love it, what you thought of this movie. The next movie that I would love for you to check out if you haven't already is 2020's Gretel and Hansel. Guys, when this movie came out, I was very excited. When the trailers came out, I was very excited. I love horror reimaginings of fairy tales because, let's be honest, the fairy tales that we grew up with are definitely terrifying. If you really sit down and think about them, they are gory and terrible, and I'm not sure how any of us slept at night when we were children after hearing about them. And Gretel and Hansel is one of those movies that does just that. It takes the classic fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel and sort of flips it on its head and really creates this beautiful movie. This is a movie that, while it is horror, it has really intense horror moments. I do believe that this is more of a slow burn movie. This isn't like your jump scares, your super intense chases, or anything like that. This is definitely a visual experience. It's very artfully done. and the atmosphere is wonderful. And the overall premise of this movie is very female forward, I think. So basically what this movie is about Gretel and Hansel. They're thrown out of their house by their mother because Gretel refuses to work for this very creepy, gross man. And she comes home and she's like, Mom, I'm not doing it. And Mom was like, okay, bye guys. I don't want to take care of you children anymore because you won't do what I say. So they escape to the woods and they happen upon this house. They're hungry, they're tired, and this house has a table, a long, big dining table filled with the most delicious food. And so they enter the house, and of course there's the witch there. And the witch takes them in. She takes them in, she settles them into their own bedrooms, and she really just makes them a part of her daily routine, and they start to feel safe. And what is interesting about this part in the movie is the way Gretel and the witch develop their relationship. They become close in a sense, but Gretel is very apprehensive of the witch, rightly so, because you know the witch is a sketch character. But the witch basically she wants to awaken the innate power within Gretel, and she promises her a life away from men and away from societal expectations that just burden women with this power. But of course, there is a price to such power, which Gretel finds out pretty quickly, and she isn't necessarily sure that she wants to pay that price. This is ultimately a female tale about what it can feel like to gain power and autonomy over your own life, and what you might have to give up, and what terrible things you might feel like you have to do to just live the life of safety and what you just autonomy. Yeah. Guys, this movie, it's so good. I've only seen it once and I really need to rewatch it again. Just the colors of this movie and all the different shots of the house and the woods, and the witch herself is very interesting. This movie is so I've talked about the movie The Witch on my channel many a times, and while I wanted to include it on this list, I just felt like I had talked about it so many times. And this, if you liked The Witch, you're going to enjoy Gretel and Hansel. Let me just say that. It's another sort of slow burn, atmospheric movie, sort of a period piece, and it's got the elements of a female rise to power and all the trappings of that. I love this movie. The last movie that I want to talk about is the remake of Suspiria that came out in 2018. Now, don't hate me. Horror movie fans out there, do not hate me. But I have seen the original Suspiria by Dario Argento, and I don't like it. I'm just not one of those people that are super into artsy cerebral films. Not my favorite, honestly. It's just sort of, I don't know, I don't have a very large attention span, so if there isn't like a really strong plot, and it's more like visual, my interest is lost so quickly. And that's what happened with the original Suspiria. But this Suspiria, I can absolutely get behind. And the main character, her name is Susie Bannion, I believe, is played by Dakota Johnson. Now, Dakota Johnson, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of discounted her because she was the main girl in all of the 50 Shades of Grey movies, and I have a lot of opinions on that series, those movies. But in this movie, Dakota Johnson is fantastic. So if you don't know what Suspiria is about, it's set in the 1970s in Berlin, and it centers around our protagonist, Susan Bannion, played by Dakota Johnson. And she goes to Berlin to join a very famous dance company headed by Helena Marcos. Little does she know that the dance company is actually owned and operated by a coven of witches. Yes, witches. We love some witches on this channel, and this movie is just so good with the witchery. Guys, this movie is just, it really took me by surprise because, like I said, I didn't like the original Suspiria, and this movie was long. It's not like, you know, an hour and a half standard typical sort of movie. This is a 2-hour kind of venture, but it is good. It is worth the slow burn build of it all. And the dancing in the movie is really amazing. Like nothing that I'm used to seeing. And I've only really ever watched, you know, like So You Think You Can Dance and that sort of thing. I know about ballet, that's it. But this dancing is very interesting, very like modern, I guess. Yeah, I don't know anything about dancing. Anyway, the dancing is amazing. And the silent dread of this movie is really atmospheric and really beautiful. So like I said, it's set in 1970s Berlin. It's a divided Berlin. And there are lots of tones of like beige and gray, and it's like rainy a lot of the time. And the coven and the witchcraft elements are sort of a pop of alarming color against this really bleak backdrop of political unrest in Berlin. And there's a lot of like quick cut shots of psychosis and like really alarming moments of like violence and gore. There's a lot of interesting lighting and makeup involved at times. And this movie's overall message really feels like femininity is a force to ascend to and to be embraced by. The ending is perhaps the most like jarring ending. I was expecting it, but I wasn't. I don't know. The ending was super freaking cool. Dakota Johnson really delivered the heck out of it. And you know, it wasn't super witchy throughout most of the movie. Like you knew witchcraft was going on, but the ending, man, the ending really brought the whole idea of the coven and the witches together. And man, oh man, I just don't want to give too much away, but I think that if you're in the mood for something that is a little more slow burn, but an absolute total payoff that is worth it, this is going to be the movie for you. And I know that people who've seen Suspiria the original are probably, I don't know, they're probably of a different mind than I am, but I really didn't enjoy the first one. I think that the original Suspiria was more style over substance, and a lot of people really enjoyed the music of the original Suspiria. And maybe it's just me, maybe I'm a lame-o, but I found the music really jarring and distracting. And while that was sort of the tone of the movie, jarring and distracting, it just wasn't my jam, guys. The remake with Dakota Johnson and Tilda Swinton, we love some Tilda Swinton, it was a lot more linear of a plot, but also not an expected way. I don't know. This one was super good, and I really recommend it. And guys, that's it. That's it for my female forward horror movie list for your Halloween viewing this week. I know I'm a bit late on all the Halloween festivities. Everyone's been posting a bunch of stuff. And you know what? I've just been in quiet contemplation and anticipation for Halloween because it's a little different this year. Things will be socially distant and trick-or-treating might not be the same. But I'm just saying, you can still have your own little Halloween thing when you're watching these movies. Am I right? I'm right. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it. And if you did, give this video a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. Hit that notification bell, subscribe, so you always know when I've got spooky things coming to ya. Bye, y'all.